So part two is me just from where I left off. Is I was telling you guys how I felt when I left the doctor's office with my three options, and how I started making more phone calls to holistic centers and talking to more doctors. And during that time, I did get my genetics testing done. And while I was walking through the lobby, a lady was coming towards me, and she had a hat on, and I couldn't see her, really see her hair, but she was older than me, probably in her early 60s, maybe late 50s. And she says, your hair is so beautiful. And I remember being at such a loss for words, because what do you say to someone who you're 99% sure is going through cancer treatments and probably has lost their hair, and they look at you with such admiration and kindness in seeing that you still have a full head of hair. And all I could find myself to say was thank you. And she said, yeah, mine is gone from all the treatments and the chemotherapy, and I'm just wondering if it's ever going to come back. And I said, yeah, I am doing my best to make sure that I can avoid that at all costs. And that really was really impactful, because one of the things that it made my mind go to is the fact that most of the holistic centers that I talk to, about 80% of their patients are stage 3 and stage 4 cancers. And that's because traditional medicine has basically told them to go home and pack it up, because there's nothing else that they can do for them. And so these people are obviously willing to try anything to prolong their life. And I'm not in that situation. So that for me was part of my thinking in terms of not wanting to go ahead and sign up for, 3 weeks in Mexico at a clinic doing immunotherapy. At first, I thought maybe I would do a lumpectomy and skip the radiation and then go to a center. I had a lot of different things that ran through my mind in terms of ways that I thought treatments that I would take. And then finally I said, no, I think I'm going to have to make a decision on surgery and a plan of action, and then maybe go to a wellness center somewhere where I can recover and relax, but do it in a place where people are healthy. Because I think overall for my well-being, that would be a better choice than going to a place where there's people who are very, very sick. I don't think that would be great emotionally, because again, just hearing that one lady say what she said to me about my hair while we walked through the genetics testing center, it really sank in deep, and let me know that these are people who are way later in the game with their diagnosis, and it was very sad, to be quite honest with you. So from my genetics testing, the good news is I don't have the breast gene, but what I do have is I do have a conversation with my holistic dentist where we discuss the fact that I have 2 root canals that are very old. They're from 2008. I had one in April and one in November of '08, and these root canals were done up traditionally. The dentist goes in, drills in there, takes out the infection, cleans it up, and then closes it up. And from there, in the holistic world, there's a thing called our meridian lines, and these meridian lines from our teeth actually also fall in line with major organs and body parts. For me, mine line up with the lung and the right breast, actually almost like right across the that 9 o'clock line, as well as I believe an ovary. Trying to think what else is in that area. But anyway, that's where my holistic dentist mentioned to me, she says, your chances of recurrence are actually, of breast cancer recurrence are actually very high, because you've had 2 root canals on the same side. And years ago, I never thought to get my root canals cleaned up, because quite frankly, my teeth haven't been bothering me. But I do know that my body does have a sensitivity to metals, which is why I had as a kid, I didn't take as good of care of my teeth. So I had a lot of fillings from cavities. And years ago, back in probably 2004, 2005, I had those replaced with porcelain fillings. But I never thought to have my crown or my root canals adjusted or fixed. And, they did have crowns over them that had metal on the inside, and I didn't know that until I had them removed. So while I went to I actually got a second opinion. So on January 3rd, I went to see a different surgeon who basically gave me a similar presentation, but she was much better at answering a lot of my questions. She has her own private practice and has been working in the arena for over 20 years. So I just felt like she was probably a better choice for me, and I switched surgeons. The next day, I actually got to meet with the plastic surgeon for the first time. And I had the plastic surgeon walk me through the 3 scenarios that I discussed with the surgeon, which were, of course, the lumpectomy with radiation, a single mastectomy, or a bilateral, or what we call a double mastectomy. And as we talked through those 3 options, we talked not just about those particular procedures, but kind of what's happening right now, what's going to happen during the surgery, and then what happens afterwards. Because I don't know that everyone thinks through the longevity of breast cancer. And what helped me come to my decision about the course of treatment I wanted to take was actually through my conversation with the plastic surgeon of all people. And the one thing that helped is I asked her, have you ever had breast cancer? And she says, no, I haven't. And I said, well, what do you see the most of? And she says, I actually end up, because I'm a plastic surgeon, I end up fixing a lot of breasts that have had a recurrence of cancer. So when she sees people, they're getting breast cancer for the second time. And if the breast has been radiated on, which we discussed in my first video, then a lot of times it messes with the skin, and you can't really operate on that breast in the same way you can as someone healthy walking in that just wants to have, new breasts or a lift or whatever. And so we talked about that a little bit. And then we talked about the fact that at my age, I have so much life ahead of me. Again, we're not promised tomorrow, but under normal circumstances, that I have so much life ahead of me that my, just statistically speaking, the chance of recurrence is high just because of my age. She said, look, if you were 75, she goes, there would be no conversation. There would be no, you wouldn't have all these choices, because your lifespan is so much shorter at that point in your life. But now it's like you have a whole nother, lifetime ahead of you. So in those situations, she says, and I said, well, what would you do if you did have cancer and you were me and you were in my shoes? And she says, oh, I'd easily get a double mastectomy. And I was like, wow, really? That's a quick answer. and her reasoning actually made a lot of sense. She said, well, she goes, number one, you never really have to think about breast cancer again. She's like, and from an emotional standpoint, there's no wondering if it's going to come back to the other breast, or is it going to come back to the same breast if you just had a lumpectomy. And the other piece of it also is that when it comes to even how breasts age, like, let's take cancer out of the situation and let's just talk cosmetic right now. Let's just talk vanity. If we're just going cosmetic, in 10 years from now when I'm 50, am I going to want a breast lift or implants or something to that effect anyway? And that answer is probably yeah. So knowing that, then, if I only do a single mastectomy, then I'm going to have one breast that might have an implant in it, and then I'll have another one that's aging naturally, and so they're not going to age the same. So I'm, in effect, going to still have a droopy breast. So that was kind of an interesting moment. And as we're continuing to talk about it, one of the other things we discussed is the fact that treatment after the fact for a double mastectomy is pretty much no more mammograms, and which I wasn't a fan of doing in the first place, and didn't want to really have to do in the future anyway. And the second one is that my follow-up appointment is really with the plastic surgeon, and it's in like 10 years when they just double check the implants to make sure they're, still doing what they're supposed to be doing and that there's no issues. So there's not 6 weeks of radiation follow-up, and which honestly is probably the most stressful part. When I think about it, I can't imagine. I live in the middle of nowhere, so I have to drive 45 minutes to go downtown every day to get a dose of radiation on my healthy body, and then drive back home and then do it again the next day. Like, that doesn't sound like fun to me at all. And thinking about lifestyle and thinking about time and just trying to put a lot of this behind me, there's just so much to that. And so in having that conversation with her, it really gave me a lot of clarity, because what I did is I went home and I looked at my husband and I said, honey, if let's pretend I didn't have, wasn't diagnosed with cancer, and I walked in the door and I said to you, I would like to have a boob job, and I'm going to get new breasts, and, I want to do it now. It's about a 3-week recovery. I said, would you think twice about it? And he looked at me and he says, no. He goes, I'd be supportive, and I'd be like, okay. I said, I know. I said, I would too. And we would make the decision, and I'd go my merry way, and that would be it. That'd be the end of it. Like, we wouldn't have any turmoil. We wouldn't be talking about, follow-up doctor's appointments and how this causes this, am I going to holistic centers? And it just became this thing where it became a very simple decision. And one of the things that I had addressed with my husband earlier in the week was that I felt like I was taking too long to make a decision about treatment, and that it was feeling complicated. And I don't typically like to, I believe in simplicity, and I believe in getting enough information to make a decision and then moving forward. And I'm not a person that likes to dwell on stuff for a really long time. I believe you just have to keep moving forward, because otherwise those will cause just delays in the process, whether it's the process of you just moving forward in your life or moving forward in business. And so for me, I was already feeling the stress of, why is this taking me so long to even just come to a solid conclusion? But it wasn't until I actually talked to the plastic surgeon that walking through each scenario that it made sense to me. And so I actually changed my course from a lumpectomy over to a double mastectomy. Through this process, I have also obviously have been on some Facebook Lives with my holistic dentist, and in getting these root canals cleaned up. And that was the part I think I left off and then I didn't come back to. But the root canals, I went to my holistic dentist in the week after. So the second week of January, went and saw him and had him actually work on these teeth, because I wanted them cleaned up so that no toxicity is going into my body. And he did find infection in there. We got him cleaned up. I don't have teeth on the side, so I'm working on getting a bridge for that. But once he did that, what's amazing is I went and got another thermogram done, and I'll post my before and after pictures in the comments. But what was really amazing is that this whole part of my head in my befores was showing a lot of metal toxicity. And after the root canal got cleaned up, and after these teeth got removed, and this had a chance to properly, heal, all of the toxicity here cleared up, as well as the toxicity that was showing in different teeth around my mouth. So that was really interesting. The left side came back with some, it has, you'll see in the chart, some black, but that's because I grind, and this is a new feeling for me with these teeth removed. So that's just a matter of adjusting my bite over here on this side. But that was really interesting. Immediately I noticed that my lungs cleared up and I could breathe. I did end up having, unfortunately, the flu for a couple of weeks. So I wasn't sure if this was flu symptoms or other symptoms, but I had this gnarly drip on the back of my throat that just wouldn't go away. My voice was really hoarse, and no sooner did the root canals get cleaned up, all that stuff cleared up. I could breathe better. I could feel my lungs clear. And I really, the part that impacted me the most was the fact that I could not feel the lump anymore at the edge of my breast. And you have to remember, it was distinct enough that that's how I found it, right? I was just feeling to get a piece of cloth or something off of my breast. So that made me feel a lot better, because I feel like in my heart of hearts that I don't know if the cancer has gone away completely, but I know for sure it's definitely shrunk, because I can't feel it on the surface anymore. And in hindsight, do I wish I had gotten these root canals addressed earlier? Yeah, I do. But life's one step at a time, and hindsight's always 2020. But it is what it is, and now it's cleaned up, and I'm grateful for that. I feel like there's there's nothing else that needs to be at least addressed in my mouth from that aspect of things, and getting rid of those metals for someone who is metal sensitive is really important, because that keeps the toxicity out of my system, while the any bacteria and infection that needed to get out couldn't come out this way, because the normal dentist doesn't let your opening breathe. They close it up right away, so if there's any infection left, then it stays. And so for me, it was like, yeah, that wasn't a good thing, because clearly it did cause some issues, but we were able to address those, and you can watch those lives. They're on my Facebook page. They're also at the Center for Natural Dentistry out in Encinitas with Dr. Marvin Pantenko, and I'll put his link in the bottom as well, so you can check him out. But you can look on his videos, and you'll see that I'm on there January 9th of 2018. I'm also there on the 11th, and then a couple more times after that. And we're talking through the results, and I actually show pictures of my thermograms and stuff on there. If you guys want to catch those, they're really short and sweet. Unless those are what brought you here to my page. So anyway, I just wanted to share my journey with you, let you know that I've definitely gone through a span of emotions in trying to understand. A lot of people talk about making sure you address emotional issues, and that was another one I did a lot of soul searching on. But in general, I'm pretty forgiving, and there wasn't anything blaring that I could find in that sense. And one of my nutrition doctors, what he said to me was, he goes, sometimes it just shows up. He's like, it's a very common cancer. He goes, like, I don't want you to, to think that it's, the end all be all, because it's definitely not. And then also through talking to more people about it, especially my initial inner circle, hearing people reach out who are like, oh yeah, my wife has had, she's been in recurrence, she's been cancer free for 25 years now. And then you hear the story, and she gets on the phone with me and tells me how, she did a lumpectomy, and one breast is 3 times smaller than the other. And in hindsight, she's like, oh yeah, maybe they could work on this now, that it's later in life for me. Or man, maybe I should have done that, a mastectomy in the beginning. My mother-in-law has one of her best friends who had also gotten a lumpectomy with radiation, and then ended up having a recurring cancer, so got a mastectomy. And then after that ended up, of course, the breasts are uneven. She goes on to age. Now she's, of course, like in her 70s. But by the time she hit her 50s, she was like, oh, let's just be done with this. And she got a double mastectomy so that she could get implants so that they would both match. So again, just as I talk to more people and hear more stories and decide the best route for me, the route for me is I want to be able to put the cancer behind me. Happy to again, share this part of my story with you guys in what I did with the dentistry. I think was huge. If you have teeth that are bad and you're thinking about a root canal, please consult a holistic dentist and let them educate you a little bit more about that and the other causes that can go along with getting those kinds of that kind of work done in your mouth. And for those of you that are uneducated about thermograms, I encourage you to go get one, try it out. It's neat, it's not invasive, and I think you'll discover a lot of cool stuff. And just for general health and wellness, I think there's a lot of really fantastic stuff out there. I know I've read a lot of stuff from Dr. Axe, which has gotten me more into things like the oils, which I've always done in like lemon and peppermint in my water, but there's so much more that can be done with even common things like allergies and stuff. So that's a great way, great piece to get educated on. And then also in our eating, of course, I've actually been relatively a healthy eater most of my life. So that one wasn't a far cry. Like, I'm not a big, I'm not all into dairy. I'm not necessarily a vegan, but I'm also not, eating steak every night. And I try to pick clean foods and meats, so organic fruits and vegetables, as well as a balanced diet. And one of the guys that I use for my nutrition and my workouts is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi of the Fit Father Project. You can look him up. He's got an excellent program out there as well. I dropped almost 20 pounds in 2 months with his program, and it didn't change too much of what I already ate. What it did is it just changed how I put my food together, and that was an interesting dynamic. And then the weight just fell right off, so that was awesome. But I've got other small things in my journey that I'm not thinking of right now, but those were the big ones that I wanted to share with you and just give you an idea so that you kind of know where my thought process was. If you are struggling with this, or you have a loved one that's struggling with it, then hopefully that gives you a little bit more information, and will just help you know that you're not alone, and that there's other people out in the world too going through probably the same string of emotions. So I do wish you the best. And again, although we're not promised tomorrow, we always should look forward to living our best life that we can as we go on. So with that, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any more questions, you're welcome to Facebook message me or message me by email. I'm happy to get to those as soon as I can. Otherwise, I'm prepping for surgery, and more tests tomorrow, and then surgery the next day. So I'll give you guys some updates as I continue on the journey here so that you can see it from start to finish. And with that, God bless you, and I wish you all the best.